Hello, I'm John Shavacco, the co-chair of the NY-GEO 2023 conference and a board member of the New York Geothermal Energy Organization. I'd like to welcome you to this recording of a live presentation from the conference, a two-day event which was held in Albany, New York on April 26th and 27th of 2023. This year's educational sessions and keynotes represent the latest in ground source heat pump system design, product innovations, and installation practices, along with important policy, regulatory, financing, and incentive updates. This presentation is one of over 40 sessions from the two-day event, all of which were recorded and available at NY-GEO's website, www.ny-geo.org, along with session descriptions and a link to download the slides from each of the sessions presented. NY-GEO is proud to make this content available to our members and other industry stakeholders, and if you are a member, thanks so much for your support and participation. If you find this content valuable and for some odd reason you are not yet a member, consider joining NY-GEO at the appropriate membership level with details available at our website. The live recording from the NY-GEO 2023 conference will start in just a moment. Thanks so much for listening.
I would recommend, if you want to get the most out of this session, we're going to be working with an Excel calculator sheet that has a lot of numbers. Sit close so you can see them because it's not full, and I mean you'll get more out of it if you can see what I'm going to show you. This tool's that you're going to see at the end is the most important tool that we have used to do over 4 million square feet of commercial projects and about 4,000 homes. This applies to the commercial side, but it's our screening tool and our number one selling tool. And it's so easy. We just fill this sheet out, and then we get to go ahead to proceed, engineer a system, go forward. It's the simplest way I've ever seen to move projects forward. And so ClimateMaster has made this available. But I am going to, because we don't know who was here and who has seen the other sessions and not or did not. So I'm going to review a little bit about the incentives, which you may be tired of hearing about by now, although they're so important. I don't think you'd be tired of hearing about them. You may see some duplication. What we're talking about is the new incentives. They give you 30 to 50%, but we will cover a few different aspects of it, how you get the maximum, and there's other benefits besides this. So, the key thing is that the tax credit rate actually went down to 6%. It used to be 10 for commercial last year, and it went to 6, but then they added, the domestic content at a rate of 2 and the energy community rate of 2. So the base rate for the tax credits is the same amount we had before, only you have to fill out extra paperwork. Okay, so to get the higher rate, you have to meet one of these three criteria. You have to either have a smaller system, less than a megawatt. If you were there at an earlier session, we have submitted testimony, written comments to Treasury for what we think constitutes a megawatt. And the most conservative interpretation would be that it's about 285 tons. So a building with less than 285 tons of what's called, quote, nameplate capacity, which we have asked that they view that as look at the mechanical equipment schedule on the plans, or someone would submit in a retrofit a mechanical equipment schedule, and you'd have the rated capacity under the conditions for that project, and you'd look at the rated cooling capacity. And that would be the size of the system. So you add it up and convert it into tons. But if it's a distributed heat pump system, it could be up to 455 tons if they listen to what we sent them. We analyze in a very scientific way, and it actually gets to a pretty sizable project. So that's the range. So a good way to look at this is if it's a small enough building that you're under 285 tons, you are going to get the maximum credit at all times, which is going to be 5 times bigger than those numbers up there. If you are in a large building that's obviously over 450 tons, you obviously are going to have to meet item number 2. unless you already have commenced construction. But, you know, there is this catch. If it was built before, came out of the ground before January 29th, you're grandfathered in. But other than that, you'd have to meet the prevailing wage and apprenticeship. No big deal, but it's just something you have to be aware of in the project. And then, so these are the rates. So this is how you get from 10% up to 50%. And the calculator will plug this in. But this is not all of the incentive. So, but first I'll take just a minute just to explain the domestic content. You know, it's basically, we believe that most geothermal systems, if you source your heat pumps from a U.S. manufacturer, and that's where all the major ones are. I mean, there may be some imports coming in from, you know, Canada. I've heard of some from China, but rarely, usually some specific products. But most of our equipment, all the major brands are built in the USA and should meet the domestic content requirement easily. We expect rules on this actually like in the next 2 to 4 weeks at most. They've come out with a schedule, and so far they're so far meeting that fairly well. So I think in general, what's not domestic and geothermal, you know, I mean, you're drilling holes, you're putting pipe in them, the pipe's made in the U.S., and we don't even know if pipe is one of the things they will care about. If you look at other kind of things with domestic content, like under the infrastructure bill, the Buy America provisions, you know, they may regulate the pipe and say it needs to be made by a domestic company, but the fittings, they don't. So, you know, we're waiting for that information. The last 10% would be energy communities, and they're basically, and how many of you were in one of the other sessions this morning where you've seen all this? So a few of you, but a lot of you haven't, so it's probably worthwhile to see this. And I guess one last thing, you know, how many here are some kind of a contractor? Very many, just a few. Designer in like MEP firms, okay, developers, okay, thank you. Just gives me an idea. You all have skin in this game, so you'll be happy to see what this does. So you basically get an extra 10% if you're in a community that had either a closed coal plant or a closed coal mining type operation. That puts you in, and it's either the MSA, which Metropolitan Statistical Area, or a non-MSA, which is just the rural equivalent of that. And so if you're in one of those or any of the ones that surround the one, so it's a pretty big thing, and you'll see this on the map, and you meet the criteria, you can, well, I'm sorry, I did say that wrong. So on the MSA, it's about fossil fuel employment. So if that area ever had, since 2009, greater than 0.17% employment related to the fossil fuel industry in any form, that would be in those areas, or if they had higher than 25% tax revenue. The other is the census tracts that are the coal mines or the coal plants that have closed since 2000 or 2010. And the other category is an EPA brownfield site. Those are very local. Those are like specific property. Like if you buy a piece of property, this would be your surveyed property, and it would be declared a brownfield site for whatever reasons EPA declared it. So each of those can add 10%. And just to give you an idea, here's a map of the EPA brownfield sites. There are a lot of them. But they're not really big. I mean, it may be a city block, might be part of a block. It might, it could be everything from where a service station had underground tanks, or a dry cleaning company had their chemicals. So you just have to look. If you happen to be on one, it's an extra 10%. But when you look at these coal plant closures, which are the brown and the light brown, there's quite a bit of those areas. Not a whole lot in New York State except in the western part. But then if you look at the employment related to the fossil fuel industry, that's everything in some kind of blue. It's a big chunk of the United States. But what isn't, and this map, by the way, is available online. You have to go to energy, just basically do a search for DOE energy communities, and up will come this map tool. But in addition to the tool, they have tables of data that you can actually click on table A, B, C. It's some of those different categories, and it's much more specific than the map. You can go into your state and it'll say this county is covered, you know, and this county isn't. So it's a very specific way to confirm that. What they haven't done yet is overlay the unemployment rate onto this data, so that part related to the unemployment rate, they're working on that, and they expect it within a few weeks. So once that's on there, this blue will shrink. I mean, if you just take the law of averages, you know, if half of that map's going to go away, you know, and half will qualify, half won't. But it may be that the fossil fuel areas have lower or higher unemployment, so we'll just see. But there's that, and then there is one last thing. They didn't actually add to this map yet areas of the country that derive more than 25% of their tax revenue off fossil fuel industry. And the reason is they haven't figured out even how to collect that data. You know, it's local tax revenue, so they have to drill down to state and local taxes on the fossil fuel industry that are contributing. So at this point, they have kind of said, we're just showing you the part we know about, that it'll probably grow. So the other thing is that these incentives can be rebated to non-taxable entities. You don't have to be a taxpayer to use them, and you'll see on the calculator, it'll calculate it. It's a little different in the result, but we'll show you that. And it's different mainly because non-taxable entities don't have assets on their books that they depreciate. There's no depreciation. So for taxable, let's just say taxable depreciation. So they will rebate the actual investment credit, but the depreciation side of this thing, which is really big too, that is not available to nonprofits. And the direct rebate, that's brand new. I mean, before now, this is everything from religious institutions, churches, schools, public schools, private schools. I mean, there's almost nothing not covered by this. Nonprofit entities, anyone that wasn't a taxpayer that couldn't use the credits, and you couldn't sell the prior credits. They actually have solved that too, but these non-taxables just get a direct rebate from Treasury as if they paid the tax. And so we don't know how long it'll take them to process the paperwork. We don't have the application form yet, but we know this law exists. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of, you know, what are you going to have to do to to get it? Because you wouldn't file a tax return. So I'm guessing they'll have you fill out the part of the tax form where you would claim as if you were a geothermal taxpayer, and they will just have you fill out some additional information about your organization, and you will get mailed a check, maybe faster than we get our refund checks. You know, we don't know yet. Transfer or sale. So now you could, if you're there's a lot of developers that have projects where they already have enough, you know, tax write-off. They basically don't have a tax appetite. And so you can actually transfer this credit from the entity you're in to another taxable entity. It can't be directly you know, you can't transfer it to another entity that let's say is 100% you, but you may be you know, a lot of these developers have LLCs, they have many partners, they're doing this building, that building, or this project complex. They can just have a different group of partners, still be in it. You can just, and the reason I say that, if you transfer to somebody you're friendly with, you probably won't have to discount it as much as if you just transfer it to a third party buyer of tax incentives where you might only get 80 cents on the dollar. So if you have an entity, a lot of them have, you know, projects that have been in place 15, 20 years, and they're just cash cows flowing all this income. Everything's paid for, and they're just generating taxable income. You can now transfer from this new one that doesn't have enough taxable income yet, that tax credit, and get your money. So it's another big new thing we never had available before. So it opens this up to be much more valuable. Okay, so this is another part. I don't think it's been talked about here yet at all, and yet it is one of the biggest parts of the credit. In fact, in the days of the old 10%, this was worth far more than the 10%, and that is the depreciation. Normally when you build a building, and if it's a commercial building, you know, other than residential, it's 39-year depreciation life. So whatever big mechanical systems go in there, they're depreciated over 39 years. If you do it in a residential building, it's like 26 or 20. It's on the calculator here. My brain's a little fried from 2 days, all this. But I used to know that off the top of my head. But essentially, if you're doing multifamily, you know what your depreciation life is. But the difference is energy property, renewable energy property, anything eligible for the 48A credit, which is like solar, geothermal heat pumps, et cetera, your property life is 5 years. And if your property life is 5 years, you're also eligible for special depreciation, which has existed for, I don't even know. I mean, they use it all the time to try to help the economy. Whenever things go south, they say, okay, you can write off your assets now. And as soon as it starts to run out, they try to renew it. Right now, it's 80%. So if you spend money on a project, let's say $1 million, and you get a $300,000 tax credit, they make you subtract, and this is very reasonable, half of the tax credit off your taxable basis in the asset. So this thing was worth $1 million on your books. You got $300,000 back as a tax credit. So now your new depreciable value was $850,000. You subtract half the credit, which I think is pretty fair of them. And then that $850, you can write off 80% of it the first year. So now you will get something like a $600,000-$700,000 income deduction immediately. Plug in your tax rate, that's another, it can be up to 20% more of a credit. So this is the part that actually made the 10% functional for all those years. And so the bonus depreciation, it was 100%, and since 2017 it's been at 100%, but it's now stepping down as part of the phase out of the, what they call, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act or whatever back in 17. And so it's stepping down, 80, 60, 40, 20, and I would probably bet a pretty good chunk of money it'll get bumped back up to a higher level. They always do. It's like the first thing to go. It's hard for anybody to be against because they don't really care if you write it off year one or over 39. They're going to get their money. They probably figure the tax rates will be higher later. Whatever the case, but they always, so I could already say it's already being discussed, as part of this, the spending cap, basically our debt limit, the debt ceiling. They're already saying we should take this off. So it'll be one of the bargaining chips between the groups. So now we're going to get into some real examples, and these are real projects that we did as a company. And this is a Catholic Charities building in Oklahoma City. It's a non-taxable entity. And this is the part where I'm hoping maybe, I doubt if you can even see these numbers from the back. I don't know that for sure. Let me see if I can zoom in on parts of it like this. Okay, so this just shows you that, and there's a new version of this calculator. This is the old one, but you'll see the new one in the end. So this is a 34,000 square foot building, about 113 tons. Well, there were 113 tons. This is all real data. This was installed in 2015, so this is 2015 kind of data. This was the cost to install the geothermal system, $21.68 a square foot. There was an absolute hard quote, same bid day for $14.96 for a rooftop single duct VAV electric reheat. That is like the most common office building system in the U.S. is rooftop VAV to ducted VAV, VAV boxes with reheat. And so you had an additional cost of $229,000. There was a utility rebate of $150 a ton, so that was $17,000. So you're down to $211,000 out of pocket for Catholic Charities and their donors to build this. And then in addition, they had annual cost savings of about $1 a square foot in energy and maintenance costs. Mainly because that was a low-end VAV and electric resistance heat, not the most efficient. We put it in 2015, and let me see if I can. Okay, so you get down in there's no depreciation, there's no tax credits, nothing. This is life without any credits at all. And you can see that they are out of pocket, $211,000. They're beginning to save money on operation and maintenance. And then this is the conventional system, and I really should, actually, that should have been out of there. So this is a little less, this is an older calculator. So because they don't get to depreciate anything, they're non-taxable. So this is actually conservative, but they had about a 5-year payback and about a 5.2 or 15% ROI, internal rate of return. It's not bad, you know, and their last building, they were in it for 90 years. So they have a long-term time horizon, these folks. So now, this is what it's like now under the new act. If the IRA existed, you know, you ran it through today, you got to realize now these numbers, don't run these to the bank. They were real numbers. First off, they got a better than average deal because they were Catholic charities. So, you know, everybody cut them a break. The manufacturer gave us a better price. The driller did. You know, so this was a little more competitive than it might have been. But, you know, now, you know, I'd say the dollars per square foot is probably easily double that. You know, we're that much later. In the last 2 years, everything, you know, has spiked. So this is what it was. So we now plug in that they will receive a 30% credit and a 10% domestic content credit, because that's the parts of our tax credits or that I think you can pretty much say everybody should get. I really don't think we will miss on the domestic content. And same cost savings. Now you plug it in, they have the same $211,000 more that they paid, but they also now have $338,000 check coming back to them from Treasury. So they are ahead, $143,000 year one, and they still have those savings going out there. So that took their payback from 5 years to 0, and it took their rate of return to infinite. And you're going to see a lot of this. So we're just getting started here. I said this morning in my opening remarks, they wanted to change the way people are doing things. And the folks from, with the calculator, Jamal, his company is a change agent company trying to change how people do things. It's not easy to do. It's hard to change, especially in the construction trades. If you don't like shake them up to the core, like you'd be an absolute fool not to do this, you know, then, you know, and that's what the IRA is going to do. People are going to say, how could I not do this? You know, this is like, I'm just leaving money on the table everywhere if I don't. So even Catholic charities now would be, you know, made whole. Now, you know, if you are in Manhattan, your drilling costs may be 3 times higher than what we had. You know, so your economics may not be this favorable, but they're not going to be dramatically unfavorable. And this is a real building too. This is a office building for a natural gas developing company, Gulfport Energy Corp. Class A owner-occupied building. It's a much larger facility. This was competitively bid, as you could imagine. Everybody goes after these kind of projects. In this case, there was a dry cooler array used to balance the load because that building rejects far more energy than it pulls back out of the ground. So this balances the load. So there were these Liebert dry coolers. I think there were 6 or 7 of them up there, and I can say we've been watching the temperatures in this building every year, and I look about every year this time, April. We're coming out of the winter, getting ready to go in the summer. It's the exact same as it was in 2016 as it is today. It hasn't risen a degree. Nothing has changed. The loop never gets above 78 degrees, never gets below like 50, 51. And that's because of the dry cooler, it gets to 51 because it rejects heat only in the winter. The dry coolers don't do nothing in the summer. They just sit there. They're not adding to peak demand. They're not affecting anything. They only operate if it's below 50 degrees outside. And we even turn them down during the day so that the people in the offices don't have to hear them. We don't turn them off. We just slow them down. So here's their economics. As they purchased it back then. Oops, let me go back to that. Let me try to zoom in on this. So now you have a 118,000 square foot building, 407 ton system. So this would fall in that gap of uncertainty. 285 tons, we know we're good. 455 tons is what we hope for. We know if you're over that, there's no hope. Somewhere, if this middle comes through, this would be eligible for not having to be prevailing wage. If it doesn't, then that's what it'll be. The geothermal cost on this building was about $30 a square foot, $3.5 million. The conventional cost was a lot higher there because they're coming down from 6 floors, trying to, pump air from the roofs way up all the way down. Big duct work, big duct chases, high pressure ducts, high pressure fans. And so these were both very real numbers. And one thing I should say about geothermal that's different than other renewable, let's say solar. It's a great example. And I love solar. I have it. I use it at our shop. I use it at my home. I use it at my farm. And but when you sell solar, the alternative is nothing. Okay, so you don't have to have solar. You're always going to be able to be power from the grid. So when you look at the economics, you're comparing the cost of solar and the benefit to just the grid electricity. With geothermal, you have a double benefit. You're looking at the savings of the energy, and you had to buy something. You have to have a heating and cooling system. So we're only working off a cost difference plus the energy savings. So that helps the economics look a lot better. And because you have to have something. Now, that's not always the case. You may have somebody with a 5-year-old building, great mechanical system that says, we want to unhook from gas, decarbonize this. And, you don't have the ability to just say, well, you have to buy something anyway. They have a functional system. We just have to figure out how to get the gas out of there. So that's one of their advantages, and that's one of the reasons the economics tend to look more favorable on these. So here we are, we're at about $200,000 more in cost. There was a pretty big utility rebate here. This was like the height of their energy, I don't know what they called their program, but it was, it's an efficiency program of some type. They calculated the demand savings, the kilowatt, the KW and the KWH savings. They plugged those in, and this is what their consultants then came up with was the benefit to them. OG&E. And then they also had some LED lighting, and that was included in this rebate, some high-end LED lighting. So then this is a really important factor. Other installation costs. I mentioned today, what is the cost basis of your system? Okay, you know that $3.5 million, that was our contract price to the GC. But that's not what the owner paid for that system. The owner also had to have the electrician power all the heat pumps. They had to have plumber run condensate drains to all these zone heat pumps. They had to have a design fee. In this case, we were the designer, so it didn't matter. There was, it was built into our number. And then they had to, a GC fee. The GCs have, whatever they make, 5, 10% on everything that flows through that building. So they take the part that was geothermal. So you are properly allocating those costs to that system because that's why they're there. So they become part of your cost basis. But they would also become part of the cost basis of this system. So this says that it's for either system, that would be that number. And then the tax rates then, and they have come down, you'll see that. But back then, this is before tax reform when the corporate tax rates were very high and the state tax rates were higher. They were in a 40% tax bracket, and ignore that, non-taxable, it shouldn't be there. And they were only getting the 10% credit. They were saving about 60 cents a square foot a year in energy and maintenance is a good chunk of that. The geothermal systems are very, very low maintenance. Essentially, you change filters twice a year. That's it. That's the most common maintenance activity. And the controls are extremely simple on heat pump systems. All the buildings we're showing you, they're all using cloud-based controls with the thermostat is the smart device, and then they go to a portal that's an energy management portal. And you can see, a lot of the same stuff you'd see in a DDC system, on that portal. all your scheduling, anybody can do it. The owner can get a phone app and they can change things. So once we started promoting that, full-blown DDC went by the wayside for geothermal heat pump system. They aren't that complicated. You don't need a bunch of modulating controls and all this stuff that forces you to full-on DDC. You turn heat pumps on and off, stage 1 to stage 2. You know, you turn it in cooling mode or maybe extra dehumidification. That's all from a stat. You know, we monitor the system pumps. We schedule on fresh air units. You know, all these things can be done with these web-based things. So that's in the number. And so that's part of why the maintenance are lower, because we get all these complaints from owners. You know, I'm a contractor here. I used to not be for 30-some years of my life at Waterford and ClimateMaster, but I am now since 2016, and they really complain that every time they want to change temperatures in an office, they get a $500 or $1,000 bill from the DDC company. Every time you want to do anything, they charge you through the nose, and they're like, I can't even change anything. I don't know how to run this thing. You know, they don't have, these aren't big enough buildings to have, you know, maintenance engineers or, you know, so they're handling it themselves. And they're like, they usually, actually, who usually gets it? The IT department. They're like, that's all I need. You know, I'm taking care of everybody's computers and all their software problems, and now I got to take care of the energy management. So they don't like that. So anyway, here we are. The calculation was, I just got to get where I can see. Okay, 50% bonus depreciation. That's what was in effect that year, 50%. There's your normal depreciation over 5 years. So you basically had here's your depreciation deduction. You get your bonus depreciation deduction of $1.7 million, which is, you know, basically through the calculation. I could show you all the inner workings, but it's in there. And then there's your 5-year part. If you total all that up, it will equal, you know, 85%, or well, in this case, it's 30% credit, so, or 10% credit. So it's just 95% of your number, but it includes this stuff right here. That's the key thing, is you have to add that on there. And so you take that, you get this depreciation deduction, and then so what's the tax benefit? Well, you add those two together, that's the tax benefit of that write-off of income. So that's in here. And this, by the way, this tool has been through CFOs, CPAs, you name it. I mean, it's been looked at by everybody. So it's pretty well tested. And the energy tax credit was $366. So now they're looking at a $200,000, you know, additional cost, and they were $1.1 million cash flow positive on these benefits. And then you have the operating and maintenance savings. And so and then here's your conventional depreciation and your conventional tax savings. So when you net all that out, they were about $890,000 to the good, and over 10 years, $2 million positive that they made the choice to go geothermal, which is why a natural gas developing company said, heck yeah, I'll put that geothermal in our building. And they were happy about it. They hated the systems in their other building. They weren't comfortable. They weren't happy with them, so they love this one. Now, if you do it now, it goes from what I would call really, really good to even better. I don't want to say crazy good or anything like that, but it's much better. But I will say this: you're looking at Oklahoma pricing for things. Everything's more in New York, a lot more in many cases. You're drilling for sure, other things. So some of this crazy stuff will kind of, dwindle down when you factor in the higher cost to do things here. But if you ran this through today, you're looking at, 118,000, basically everything the same until you get down to, well, two things have changed, okay? The corporate tax rate is they're no longer 40. The state's lower, the federal's lower. They went from 40 down to 26 tax. So they just lost some tax benefits from the depreciation side of things. That's gone. But they get the 30% and the 10%, that's the assumption here. And same saving. I did put the energy inflation higher because it's higher. And I don't think it's coming down. I mean, I think everybody would say the long-term prognosis is that, we're going to have a higher than we have seen in the last 20-year inflation rate. on gas and such things going forward for all kinds of reasons. And so in this case, you have a bigger depreciation write-off because it was renewed back up to 100%, but 2023 is the first year it drops to 80. So that's built in here. And all the other things flow through, and you end up now, you are about 2 million, 1.9 million positive compared to only 23,000 tax benefit on the conventional. And so it basically added about 700,000 over the first 10 years. But again, how good a salesman do you need to sell this? Okay. You know, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from salespeople, but seriously, if you can't sell this, I don't know what you need to do. I mean, you know, the biggest thing we have, this is too good to be true. There's got to be something wrong with this thing. What's wrong? It's like, well, okay, there's 4 million square feet. You can call up any one of these people you want. You know, does it work? You can ask. I mean, most of our business is repeat customers. We have GCs that come to us over and over. So once they get over the hurdle that there's something weird about this, that it's risky, technically risky, or they won't be comfortable. Like, am I going to be comfortable? Well, I say, well, you know, your air conditioner is sitting up in that roof, you know, trying to dump your heat from the building into a rooftop that in Oklahoma could easily be 115 degrees up there when the air is 105, you know, and you've got these high pressure ducts that require 4 times the fan horsepower to get the energy down to you. You compare that to the highest water temperature we see in the summer, 78 degrees, you know, into a water-cooled unit, which is more efficient to begin with because water is a better heat conductor than air. You know, that's a fundamental thing in geothermal. I mean, and you know, everybody goes to the blacksmith. You know, you got the red hot piece of iron, you lay it on your workbench, and 10 minutes later, if you touched it, it's not red anymore, but it'll still blister your hand. Dip it in the bucket of water, and you can touch it as soon as you pull it out because water is thousands of times more energy dense and conductive. So that's one of the benefits. And then they got this big utility rebate, and the utility made a big deal about it. And that's probably why they quit doing them that big, because they probably took a lot of flack. How could you be giving these people that are obviously doing well so much money? But that's what the calculation came out to. And, you know, and let me just show you what this has done in our business. Because, you know, I will say over the years, the geothermal projects we have seen going in were plan and spec, institutional, you know, like schools, universities, government buildings, libraries, you know, not private businesses. But when that credit came out in 2008, we were able to take it to private businesses. And when we showed them these numbers, they really liked it. So, I mean, as you can imagine, so we've done about 1 million square feet of office building. You know, this isn't big in New York City terms, but it's 37 projects that average, you know, 32 to 118,000 square feet. Some public buildings, charitable buildings, multifamily buildings, assisted living facilities, schools, lodging, some retail. We've done a lot of industrial space, more and more, and warehouse space, manufacturing and warehouse. More and more, you know, what is everything being built now? Look around our city. Only thing going up is tilt-up warehouse buildings, you know, by the square mile because of all the online shopping and fulfillment. There's just, you know, everybody, all kinds of grocery chain, there's just so much stuff being taken to people's homes, and they're building buildings to put it in. And so a lot of them are now starting to cool their warehouses. You know, you would say, is that good for energy? But they're like, people won't work here if we don't give them cooling. You know, it's too hot, too hard to retain people. You know, so, and then auto and truck dealerships, mainly these are big truck dealerships, Kenworth truck dealerships around the country. We've done a bunch of them, and they're a great example. So those are not the places you would typically think of as water source heat pump jobs. If you're a rep, you would not think I'm going to go after car dealers or truck dealers or these. But that's exactly, this opens up, actually, these are like 95% of buildings built are in that kind of size range. It's only, you know, 5% in terms of starts not in square footage, the ones that get built that are big or giant, 3 million square feet, they represent a bigger pie of the whole square footage. But as far as number of buildings that go up, just look around. All these suburban little buildings, 2 stories, 6 stories, 8 stories, whatever, they're everywhere. And so there's a lot of buildings there. So this is the new tool. It's just been cleaned up and refined. And I think I can just, well, this is an example right now with today's pricing on things in Oklahoma City. So we have an office building here. It's 50,000 square feet. We just assume, and this is how we do these. We say, how do we use this as a screening tool, a sales tool? Well, we just know, they're all going to be around 350, 400 square feet per ton. It used to be more like 350 or less, but, glass is better, lighting is better. So, now 400 is not atypical at all, even more. So about 125 tons in that building. And we have, the building is a pass-through entity, so some LLC owns this. So it's being passed through. They're in the state of Oklahoma. This calculator has every state's tax rates, all this stuff built in. So you pick what state you're in, and I'm going to show you this live so you can give me some numbers. We can plug them in, see how they look. Pass-through entity. So the conventional cost, we calculated this conventional cost. I can't remember. This would have been Landmark. What was the conventional there? Yeah, it was splits, It's not unusual on a 2-story building or less. They'll just have a condenser farm up on the roof. You see them in some cities, they're prevalent.
Dan, you're going to do something live. You got about 12 minutes.
Okay, I'll have time. I just want to show. So this is the same thing, all the information. It actually pre-fills in these tax rates. It does the domestic, basically you have to decide whether you're going to achieve these two and tell it. It can't know. It does know this. Well, even that you have to say, because it doesn't know if you're going to be prevailing wage or not. Then it calculates everything. So here's this building. And by the way, the cost now was $12,820. That's a real project, just quoted. $12,800 a ton, or about $32 a square foot versus $22. And we have a savings of about 75 cents in energy and maintenance. So you come across, and in this project, you are still really, really cash flow positive. So now I'll actually, throw the calculator up live, and we could change a few of these things, and I'll show you what they do. Okay. So this is that same example. It's starting out with the same example, but I could change something. For example, if we put it in, let's say, the state of New York, which should be in here. And we can plug in, instead of a pass-through entity, maybe it's a C Corp or a non-taxable. I'll just throw it in as a C Corp for now. You can see these numbers changing down here. And let's just take these costs per square foot and say, no, that's way too low. Let's make the geothermal $55 a square foot. And the conventional, maybe, I don't know, $30 a square foot, $35. And utility rebates, I don't know, you've got all kinds of great programs. I don't know whether to plug anything in here. Ours work per ton. I know I heard all kinds of numbers. We can just plug 1,200. Well, I'll do it. It looks pretty good without it, but let's do it. Okay, so let's just plug in 1,200. And then you've got your tax rates are in there. Your other installation costs, well, obviously, if we doubled the cost of the equipment, this would probably be more like $250 grand for all these other costs. Oops, don't want to do that. And then your credit, I'm assuming you're getting the energy credit. It's below 285, so it should be the full 30%. Let's just say we're not in an energy community, so let me take that out. And your domestic content is there, though. And you can see in this case, you're 800,000 positive, and over the first 10 years, 1.3 million. And it's still obviously performing really well. But I can change any, this is a place where you can tell me some numbers. If you have any idea of how much systems go in for, I'll plug them in here. Or we could do it with a pass-through or a non-taxable. They won't have the depreciation, so let's take a look at a non-taxable entity. Okay, so it's obviously not as good because they don't have any depreciation deduction. But still, it's not costing them anything. There's no reason, they wouldn't want to do it. Our success rate with this thing is like 90-some%. If we get this in front of somebody, the only time it's ever failed is if it goes some engineer and they just sit on it and they don't show anybody. We try to never I'm not against engineers, we just try to get to the decision maker. Could be an architect, could be somebody, but we try to get it. If an engineer knows about this, I would think in their professional ethics, they should mention this option exists, Mr. Architect, Mr. Owner, because look, we have a system that could save you money, decarbonize your building, and put, and be positive cash flow for you, so it's there. So this is I can change things in here, or I can just answer some questions, but everything you saw on that list was sold with this tool, and it's evolved. This tool is now, you can download this on the ClimateMaster website. I think I can show you that. Here, I have a QR code to it, if anybody wants that. You can take a picture of that, and it'll take you to the form where you can download this tool. It's actually pretty easy to use. There's a help tab, and you can see, if you just go through it, you can look at, it's kind of self-explanatory. We tried to put error traps in it so you couldn't blow it up. I'm sure, though, somebody can get creative and figure out a way to blow it up, then if it does, just close it, don't save, and restart it, and reload it. Because, if you put in a symbol where there should be a number, I think I've caught all those. It was really designed as our own little in-house tool, and it's just evolved into something else. But it's very time-saving for everybody in the process if you can get these things in front of somebody early on. Yes?
So on the 285, I'm recording. I know, don't you want to be recorded forever? Is that it?
Lost charity. Okay, so on the nonprofit, 285-ton limit.
Yeah.
Is that a hard limit? So if a building, let's say, is 300 tons and it's over to, do you get the credit on 285? Is it prorated in any way, or you just cut out?
I think that at this point, I think the non-taxable entities, I'm not aware, no, I think what he was saying this morning, and I think the same criteria apply. If it's below 445, you're saying what happens if you go above that? Whatever it might be, you just have to use prevailing wage. You'll still get all the benefits. I think what he was saying this morning, Gordon, was that there is a point where you'll have to have domestic content, or you won't be able to get it.
Well, we're going to have domestic content.
I don't know how you
that's
can not have
non-brainer.
domestic content in GEO, unless you're, like I say, don't buy it. I love Canadians. I got a couple best friends of life sitting there, Canadian, but just don't buy a Canadian heat pump or a Chinese heat pump, and you're fine,
So let's say, because one of the places that it's not our client, but we're talking to and trying to influence is, for example, MIT. They got a bunch of big buildings, but they are a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And so, a bunch of buildings fall under 445 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But
I don't think you fall off the screen there. I mean, you have to use prevailing wage on bigger ones, but not on small ones. But you still are eligible for that 10%. So you'll get the 30, you'll get the 10, and then if you're in an energy community, you could get another 10.
Okay, but so you get the 445 even if you got a 500-ton building, or you get nothing on a 500?
No, that's just all that is a trigger. If you exceed that, you have to be prevailing wage. If you're below that, you don't. That's
So
all
that's
it is.
not a cutoff for the credit.
Not any kind of cutoff, no.
There's no cutoff for the credit.
There's no cutoff for the credit. I mean, I was sitting in developers' offices in Manhattan, and they're like, wow, this is gonna be $18 million or what, you know, I mean, these are big projects, big developers, and they were like, light bulbs going off, like, how much you want for telling us this? I said, nothing, I'm just here to inform you. And I
Wow.
thought, how stupid am I?
I gotta go back and read that.
Anybody else? Get you next.
Yeah, I was just wondering, what is it that they're going to announce in May of this year? I mean, it sounds like you already know.
Well, okay, they're
Is
gonna.
it just a confirmation that,
Well, in May, they are going to do two things. They are going to make absolutely clear this domestic content. It's hard to interpret their language, which is not unusual. And this bill, I mean, if you had read this bill, and I'll just tell you, it was like, whatever it was, 1,100 pages. It's all amending language. If you're an attorney, you're not like seeing the law as it's going to write. You're saying, substitute this for this in this section, and it's all amending language. So you gotta have like documents open all over, trying to plug things to figure out what you're looking at. So I don't know how members vote on stuff like that, but they just have to trust their leadership, I guess. But what's an infinite? Infinite? Well, it just means that you can't divide by zero. You know, it's
So what would it be?
it's just really, really good. Essentially, you're never out. You're all in, it's always positive.
But it's more than
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if you can have degrees of infinite return. I didn't know how to calculate that, but, you know, if you try to do an internal rate of return calc, it'll just return n/a, like we can't, does not compute. Yeah, yeah. So, getting back to your question, what we expect to find out is on domestic content, some specific detail of, how much of the iron and steel matter. Like, for example, they came out with instructions for the commercial tax credit form for 2022. But they actually put things in it, like about domestic content and energy communities. They're not even valid till 2023, so I'm not even sure why they were in there, but they were in there. You know, and they said, well, by iron and steel, we're talking about like structural iron and steel and stuff like that. I don't believe that, because how much of that would go into a geothermal heat pump project? You know, like zero, red iron? You know, I mean, maybe you're gonna, I don't know where you would use it. No, so what I have said is I take it at face value what the law said. It said items made primarily of, equipment or property. Property made primarily of iron and steel, it must be U.S. So I view it as, we better make sure the metal we're making out, the steel we're making our ductwork, better be American coiled steel, which it is. You know, the unistrut, the hanging rods, all that we're gonna make sure it's Buy America rated. The clevises for hanging pipe, whatever, that we would use American, if the product is just steel, it'd be American made. Then when you get into like a pump room, I said the air separator, which is a big chunk of iron, it better be a Buy American version. Plenty of them have them, TACO, there's all kinds of US made air separators. There are some that come from Asia, but you just make sure you don't have one of them. Now, they may lighten, we don't know how tight they're gonna go on that rule, so it may not be that would apply. But when I went through everything, the pumps, this and that, the only thing that concerned me is we use some high-tech pumps that are made by Grundfos in, Eastern Europe. We love those pumps, I don't know, they're not manufactured in the USA. They do assemble some in the USA, but it's imported components. So there's then this issue of the manufactured items. If they're not primarily iron or steel, like a pump, it's not primarily iron and steel, it's electronics, it's got built-in controls, it's a variable speed thing. It just says that it has to be assembled in the USA, and that the components inside of it, at least 40% of the cost has to be US content. So, they would have to decide about, they'd have to do their own internal analysis and come up with a sheet that said, yes, this complies with that rule. But then there are other people who interpret it as no, they just mean that 40% of all your manufactured stuff has to be made in the USA. So I don't know which one that is. I just take the more conservative view that all your manufactured stuff should be made in USA and that the parts in it can't exceed more than 40% imported. Or,
We got one more for you.
okay, yes.
I also understand the IRA modified the 179D tax deduction.
Yes,
Does that
it did.
apply to geothermal projects?
Yes, it does, and Gordon, I hope I'm saying that, Jacob, I guess, sorry, Jacob went through that last session from Energy Tax Savers. That's all they do is advise on that, but they made it basically 5 times bigger. You know, well, it went from 50 cents a square foot to 250, so it's much bigger. But you do have to be prevailing wage every single time. Little job, big job, doesn't matter. You have to be prevailing wage to get it. And I think that's about the only other, you know, the question of whether it's 50 cents or, you know, the percentage or how much you get is how much you save over the baseline 90.1 building model. You know, and right now it's back at like some old year, like 2007 or it was, as long as you're X% better than that one, you know, you can get a percentage, and if you're twice as good, you know, you can get to the maximum. So there's a formula in there, you know. There's so much in this thing. I didn't spend a lot of time in that one because you pretty much have to have a high-end, you know, MEP firm do a building model, prove it. You know, you're going to spend some money to get it, but you're also going to get it. And I like to just fill one number in a blank on a form. You get a whole bunch of money back. That's easy, you know. And so that's the one that we focus on. But it's there, and it's available for designers on non-taxable entities. So essentially, any of those non-taxables that get a rebate, the design under 179 would go to the design firm. And the architects and the engineers will have to argue over who gets what, but of that. But then on the, if it's a taxable business, then it goes to them. It's more money for them.
Dan Ellis,